Alright guys, so now we've come to the part where we're going to animate the landing page here a little bit. Now, what I'd like you guys to do is to pause the video and try this out, and I'm going to give you some hints on what I'm going to be doing. So if you remember, we have the transform property, and we have translate Y and translate X. And what that does is it brings it from one point to another. So what I'm going to do is use keyframes, and I'm going to initially set the translate X value of the header to be way up here, basically out of the screen. I'm going to set this to be way over here out of the screen, and then on the animation, I want to set it to come to its original spot, which is basically 0. All right, so if you want to take that information and try this yourself, feel free to do that. Okay, and if you want to pause the video and come back. So let's go ahead and do this. Now, remember, we're only animating page 1 because we're only using HTML and CSS. If you got into JavaScript or jQuery, you could make it so when you hit a certain point, you could animate the next one and the next one, but you can't really do that with just CSS in this case. So we just want the landing page to animate. So remember, it has an ID of page 1. So I'm going to go over here in the CSS and say page animation, and we're going to take the ID of page-1, and we want the H1, and I'm going to add a transform. Transform, and then translate. We want to translate Y, and we want to set this to be off the page. So I'm going to do negative, and let's do 1200 and save. Wait a minute. Transform, translate Y. Oh, I forgot pixels. Okay, so now what happened is we moved it on the y-axis. We moved it up since we did a negative value, 1200 pixels. So basically, it's just up off the page. Now, you want to make sure you go up high enough. I think 1200 pixels is pretty good. If you don't go up high enough and someone uses it on a very large screen, then they're still going to be able to see it. So you really have to take that into account. But I just want you to know basically how to do this. Now, we're going to want to animate this, so let's say animate, and let's call this, we'll just call the animation heading since that's what we're animating. I'm sorry, not animate, animation. So we'll call it heading, and then we want the speed. Now remember, we put the speed inside a variable, so we're going to say speed, actually what do we say, animate speed. Animate speed, and then we want forwards because we want it to stay there, otherwise it's just going to come down and then it's going to disappear. And then let's do an ease, we'll do an ease in. Alright, now if I save this, nothing's going to happen because we haven't created the animation, or the keyframe I should say. So let's go down here and let's say at keyframes, and we called it heading. And this is going to be very simple. All we need to do is bring it to its original space. So let's grab this, and we want to set the translate Y simply to 0, which is its original spot. Whoop, I forgot the 2. Alright, so we'll move this up into here, and now let's save. And there it is. And that's pretty fast. I guess we could change the speed to, let's try 2 seconds. We save that. Comes in a little slower. All right, now we just need to do the same thing for the paragraph, but we want to do translate X because we're on the X-axis. So if you couldn't figure it out before, maybe you want to pause the video now and try it out because we're basically doing the same thing just along the X-axis for the paragraph. So I can even copy this and change this to paragraph, and let's do translate X, and let's do Just in case it's a really wide screen, let's do negative 1800 pixels. And then animation, we want to change this to, let's call this text. Now you could have different speeds for each one if you wanted to, but I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to leave it the same speed. One thing I do want to do though is add a delay because I want the heading to come down and then the paragraph to come in after. So let's add a delay of 2 seconds. We'll see how that does. And then just down here, we're going to set a new keyframe. I'm going to copy this and we'll call this text. And we just want to change this to translate X. Okay, so let's save it, try it out. So comes in from the top, comes in from the side. Okay, so that's pretty much it. And you can experiment with it if you want it to be faster, slower, if you want it, move it up higher or lower, whatever you want to do is fine. And you can also animate other things, like you could change the colors and stuff like that. So experiment with it a little bit. So last thing I want to do is implement the jQuery scroll, because right now it just goes right to the page, which is fine, but I just want to add that little bit of flair to it. So let's Google jQuery CDN, which is, I don't know why I don't just go to code.jquery.com, but we're going to choose the minified version here. I'm going to grab the script tag. And let's put this in the index.html. Okay, it's going to go right above the ending body. And then instead of creating a whole new JavaScript file, I'm just going to put a script tag here, and we're going to add that bit of JavaScript here. So let me just grab that real quick, paste that in. And I'm pasting it in because this is not a JavaScript course. I'm not going to get into jQuery and JavaScript and all that stuff. But it's a handy little snippet if you want to use it. So let's save that. And we have our animation. Maybe 2-second delay is a little too much. So we'll change that to 1. That's good. So now when I click the next page, it scrolls down. All right, and the reason it's doing that is because we're saying for anything with class button, on click, we're going to run a function, and we're basically going to check the hash, which is the the ID. So we're going to check that, or I should say right here, it's going to check this, and it's going to scroll to that area using the animate method. Okay, and you can change that speed right here as well. So if we change this to like 400, and we try this, it goes faster. If we change it to 1400, goes slower. Okay, so you can change that to whatever you want. I think 800 is pretty good, but that's it. So now we have a nice little presentation website, and again, if you had some kind of conference, you could use this. You'd probably want to add some charts and maybe some images and stuff like that, but this gives you kind of a boilerplate for that type of website. All right, guys, hopefully you like this little project, and that's it. I'll see you in the next one.